Welcome to Running Through Walls, a Venrock podcast featuring conversations between investors and entrepreneurs. Each episode, we offer a behind-the-scenes look at pivotal moments in time.
Hello, everyone. I'm David Packman, a partner at Venrock, and today on Running Through Walls, I'll be speaking with Brad Bagolia, the co-founder and CEO of Symbi Robotics. Symbi is building robots for the retail industry, and their first product, Tally, is an autonomous shelf auditing and analytics solution. In other words, it helps retailers track inventory to keep shelves stocked and priced accurately. Welcome, Brad.
David, happy to be here, and thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here too. Well, let's dig in. First question for you that I ask everyone in robotics. Robots are hard. What led you to a career in robotics?
It's a really great question. I've always had interest in technology and, its role to help us at home or, really at work. And I think the best sort of generational companies are kind of really focused on solving harder, difficult problems, not things that are incremental. And I spent the last 10 years kind of working at the intersection of hardware, software, and data. So not quite as multidisciplinary as robotics, but more on the full stack side in the energy and utility industry. And after going through 2 early acquisitions and ultimately being part of a company that went IPO, I really wanted to go back to my entrepreneurial roots. And I really credit my co-founder and good friend Shah for really helping to open my eyes on the possibilities with robotics and computer vision. And, I started to see that, we're really on sort of a precipice of this next technology revolution and really wanted to be part of it.
So on the tech side, you saw some possibilities of where computer vision and navigation and robotics were going. What led you to found Symbi? What was the problem set that you were intrigued by?
Perhaps it's a bit helpful to maybe talk a little bit about the founding story a bit more. But, my 2 co-founders came out of what was known as Willow Garage. And for those that don't know, it was this world-renowned robotics think tank that was here in Silicon Valley that focused extensively on research and robotics, computer vision, and built incredibly valuable open source tools like the robot operating system that have really become the de facto standard. And as I started to see the opportunity around, this type of technology, it was quite clear of its long-term application within traditional industries. And when we started to dig deeper, the problems in retail just seemed too big to be overlooked, and felt it was the perfect opportunity, especially as Willow as a think tank was beginning to disband, for us to come together and start a company. All the while, Sean and I had been building, robots for fun, during our nights and weekends, and had been experimenting with a variety of computer vision applications. So it really felt like the perfect time to dive headfirst in.
Retailers seem like an interesting market to start with. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the pain points that retailers experience that you're solving. And in particular, the retailers appear to me to be a segment that tends to solve problems by hiring more people or focusing people on it. I'd love to hear your observations about how they embraced or are embracing technology to solve the problems that you're focused on here.
As shoppers ourselves, we've all experienced the challenge or frustration of the product we're looking for in store not being on shelf, or not part of your online grocery order. Retailer supply chains and their stores are incredibly complex. And there's actually always been this blind spot in physical retail that retailers don't always have a good understanding of what's on their shelves, where it's located, is it properly priced? And given that these stores often have tens or hundreds of thousands of fast-moving goods and other issues to manage like shrink, inventory being in multiple places, there's an incredible opportunity for performance improvement through automation and better data.
Have you been impressed by retailers' embrace of your particular solution to these problems?
We have, and as you can imagine, changing the way things are done in a traditional industry, it really becomes sort of a culture shift or a bit of change management. But this type of problem actually costs the global retail industry more than $1 trillion, and close to a quarter of Amazon's revenue actually comes from customers that attempted to buy a product sort of in store first. So we're seeing a lot of interesting dynamics come together to drive greater adoption in our type of solution and technology. So you have the competitive aspects of Amazon and the traditional retailers not wanting to be sort of left behind. You have massive increases in consumer expectations in sort of the on-demand economy that we live in, and extreme increases in areas like online grocery, where all of the online grocery services today pick physical orders out of these stores. So having this type of visibility and data is actually crucial for the future of physical retail.
That makes sense. I can see all the competitive pressure and the customer pressure creating an impetus for retailers to want to adopt robotics and technology. How old is Simbi? When were you guys first founded?
We got started in late 2014, really as sort of back a napkin with Shah, our other co-founder, Jeff, who came from Willow Garage as well.
So that's quite a ride. Many robotic companies fail. How have you been able to make it this far? And what's the key for you to continue to grow and get even bigger from here?
I think there have been a few key attributes that could lend to our success so far. And of course, there's always luck. But one attribute, I'd really kind of put on the team. We've had a small but nimble team with really great contrast, and we're able to build on a lot of the great work that happened at places like Willow Garage and bring a robotic solution to market on far less resources than many of our category peers in, warehouse or sort of agriculture sort of robotics. I would say the other piece is all the decisions we've made in sort of the business, especially as it relates to product or technology, were very customer sort of ROI oriented. I think many times roboticists can get very enamored with sort of the technology that they're using and lose sight of really the customer experience. Are they really building a product or business that will have the right unit economics or that can really scale?
That's been my impression of you guys. Is one of the key attributes of the company is you've done a lot with a little. When I first met you, you were already on like version 2.5 of your robot. You had only raised like $8 million. Mm-hmm. So you got a robot to market on a very low amount of capital and got it in the market, iterated on it, solved customer problems, learned about the adoption cycle. So I think somehow you were able to achieve commercial traction on very little capital, which seems to be the inverse of a lot of robotics companies. How do you go from here now that you've got a number of customers and your rate of growth is accelerating? How do you take it from here to something much, much bigger?
Many of our priorities today are really kind of focused on growth and scaling the business. We had proven in the market that we had kind of aligned around sort of product market fit. So much of our efforts have really been supporting the build out of the commercial side of the business. So we have the proper business development and sort of sales resources to really accelerate growth, both domestically and abroad, as well as properly architecting sort of the customer success and services side of the business to ensure we meet or exceed all of our promises to our customers and help them get to scale. Many of our efforts are really focused on the growth side of the business.
What's been your proudest moment so far?
Within a startup, you always have those moments that you remember. There are a few from, your first investment check to your first customer. Maybe I'll give you one on both the product and one on the business side. On the product side, I think our proudest moment was when our robots in store were both fully autonomous from a navigation as well as a computer vision processing standpoint. And taking the opportunity as a team and just, reflect on the sheer magnitude of work it took. It was actually years to actually sort of accomplish that was a really proud moment. More recently on the business side, seeing ourselves scale to multiple customers in a handful of different countries. But even more recently, throughout the pandemic, we were able to assist retailers heavily behind the scenes and help ensure that they were able to get products as fast as they could back on the shelf and in the right place. So serving as a support function to these grocers was something that kind of really made us feel good.
Well, that's great. But I think one of the things we try to celebrate and explore on this podcast is the struggle as well. Anyone who's been an entrepreneur knows that the journey is often fraught with a lot of setbacks. That's why we call it running through walls. Can you share with us maybe one or two of the toughest moments that you faced as an entrepreneur in building Symbi so far, and maybe what you've learned from it?
Yes, absolutely. The early days were, of course, hard, especially building technology with this level of complexity. You're essentially starting to try to build a full stack company. In those days, most investment groups weren't really investing in robotics companies. So we had raised, some very small checks. You're essentially trying to build business off of more than perhaps you made in your last job. And, I think for us, we found a unique knack in the early days on some great sort of, micro stage funds and sort of angels that had, some long-term conviction that could help carry us, sort of forward as this technology sort of started to mature. But, pounding the pavement, with 50 or 70 investors in the early days and coming up, empty-handed is sort of never easy. But we're seeing a lot more entities invest in robotics today. In addition, selling to some of the largest businesses, retail is also not easy. It was hard for us to find, sort of our first and sort of early partners. We actually spent much of our early journey getting kicked out of retail stores for trying to sneak our technology in to do testing. So, of course, you have these moments in the early stage of the company of, you start to ask yourselves, is this too hard, or are we doing the right things? But, eventually we got there.
That's cool. I imagine that, financing in this sector, can and has been a challenge. But the perfect antidote maybe to that is, continued customer traction. I want to switch for a second, talk a little bit about the product. So, you've got this self-navigating, self-charging robot driving up and down store aisles, not running into people or avoiding spills and not banging into things. Why was it necessary to build a robot to do this, to look at store shelves and look for missing items or mispriced items? Why not just use shelf cameras or ceiling cameras anywhere? It seems like a hard solution to a problem.
Yes. So as you know today, David, most of these retailers attempt to use labor around this problem. And that's been the approach since the beginning of time with sort of retail stores. The challenge with cameras or fixed infrastructure, especially in large environments like your neighborhood grocery store or something like a Target store, it's just not cost effective or practical to mount cameras everywhere. These retail stores are margin constrained businesses. The density of cameras you would require would be a very significant number of cameras. And if they're overhead, you're not actually capturing, what's happening physically on the shelf. And if they're opposing cameras in the aisle, you're only capturing a portion of the value that our robot that can actually hug the aisle can really capture. In addition, there's probably some concerns on the consumer side of coming into a store that would have hundreds or thousands of cameras everywhere. So we have found a robot allows us to get up and running in these environments with really no infrastructure changes, keep up with all the changes in the environment. So what's on these shelves change all the time, where the shelves are in the store change all the time, without us ever having to kind of visit the store again. And the fact that the robot traverses these aisles so closely, we're able to get greater optical data about what's actually happening on the store shelves. So decode things like barcodes and what have you. So because of this, we believe strongly that robotic solution is the right solution for large scale retail store environments. And as the cost of sensing technology comes down, we think there are opportunities for small format environments like convenience stores to use fixed cameras. And we have some interesting work going on in this area that we hope to share with the market later this year.
It is pretty cool to see how you take this robot out of the box when you get to a store, you plug it in and let it go, and it maps the store, and within an hour or two starts telling you what's on the shelves and what's not. So it's impressive how quickly you can get to value for the customer. What kind of performance improvement or ROI do your customers see from using Tally?
Yes, what's really unique about this out of the box performance, David, is, within minutes of being on the ground, we know more about this retail store than, the store manager as it relates to what products are on the shelf or not, or more about the chief customer or stores officer. So the frequency of the data we're capturing allows us to typically see between 5 and 15 times the number of out on shelf scenarios that a store team would. And we of course recognize, every product that's not on shelf is sort of a missed sales opportunity for the customer. So what we've seen is through the data that we provide around these out of stock scenarios bounced against the retailer supply chain or inventory system, we find that a large portion of these scenarios are often controllable. And today we're seeing upwards of, in some cases, 50% of these scenarios can actually be controlled or fixed by the store team. So what we've garnered in our experience with these retailers is, traditionally a minimum of a 30% reduction in, sort of the out of stock or out on shelf scenarios that they have. And by reducing that, we've been able to prove a meaningful increase in both sales and margin in their business. And on this aspect alone, the retailer is able to build a business case, sort of around our product. But there's a lot of other areas where we add value. Most of these retail stores have pricing and promotion programs. You get your weekly sale ad in your, mailbox at home. It's important that those prices and promotions are properly executed at the store level. And for many shoppers, that's when they buy products. They may only buy Greek yogurt when it's 10 for 10. So ensuring that pricing and promotion is properly executed in the store is very important. We find many price tags that are incorrect, as well as we build an up-to-date map of product availability and location information. You can kind of think of this as almost like Google Street View or Google Search for these stores. So having up-to-date information about what product is on shelf and where it is so valuable to so many different stakeholders, whether you're a consumer or shopper, or someone like an Instacart or a DoorDash.
I know how frustrating it is as a customer coming to a store and them not having something in stock on the shelf that you expected them to have. But it's equally frustrating as a delivery customer ordering something on the app and then having to get a substitution or it not showing up. How does the Tally solution help solve the delivery problem?
As far as online grocery today, you're buying online groceries through Instacart or DoorDash or Shipt. They don't control the inventory, the retailer does. And, they're sending folks in to kind of pick this sort of inventory. So often when they dispatch someone, they don't truly know whether that product is on shelf or not. They can make some probabilistic assumptions, but those are very difficult to actually be sort of accurate. So an area that, Tally really helps is to provide more of a continuous stream of intelligence on, is this product on shelf and where is it actually located? And, that sort of map or coordinate system actually allows these online grocery shoppers to pick products faster. It's like following Google Maps to your destination versus reading an old map or going from memory. In addition, the assortment and variety in these stores is always changing. And that's another challenge for online grocery to keep up with. And, Tally is able to keep track of new products coming in and going out and what the current assortment is within this environment.
Has the pandemic accelerated some of these changes, or what other ways has the pandemic affected the role of robots in stores?
The pandemic overall has really kind of exposed the need for, more automation, better data, and quite frankly, better resiliency within these retail stores. And as this pandemic has begun to stabilize, what it's really done is force the leadership team of every retailer on the planet to begin rethinking their IT data, customer experience, and sort of labor roadmap strategy. And as part of that, they're seeing solutions like Tally to really be a power tool to help them better optimize and extract as much value, both from their labor in store as they can. So we've had some of our greatest growth actually throughout the pandemic, in the last few quarters, and, have had some of our strongest interest. with more people, working from home, perhaps even perpetually, many of these habits are actually sticking in grocery stores. So online grocery is here to stay, and many people are eating at home instead of eating at work or at school. So this data has, never been, more critical.
Cool. Let's switch gears a little bit away from the product and tell me about how your leadership style has changed over the years. You have a product and a market and market development background, but now as a founder and a CEO, what have you learned and what's changed?
In the beginning, really coming from sort of a product or product management background, of course, very hands-on, supporting the build outs of much of the early tech, living out of a hotel in Shenzhen for 6 months, setting up our initial manufacturing. But, as a company, as soon as we started to kind of approach 15 people or so, so much of, my role shifted to kind of the human elements of the business and really focusing on sort of scaling. So much of that is around communication, alignment, goal setting, feedback. And as we bring more valuable stakeholders into the business, whether that's investors, business development partners, customers, there's a significant amount of time management around these pieces. I think we all recognize that people are sort of the most important asset in really any company. So, much of my time today is trying to find ways for us to work better together and, accelerate our velocity.
How do you approach hiring at Symbi? I presume that building a robotics company, selling a solution into retail is a real mix of specialty experience sets.
Yes, we really like to kind of focus on the individual, and perhaps that means really sort of culture fit and sort of their experience and traits. I think we all recognize the incredible opportunity that's in the tech ecosystem today, especially for often the type of people that we're pursuing as a company. Surely someone can go get a higher paying job at sort of Apple or Google or Tesla, but what we really provide is a unique opportunity to directly contribute. You're not going to just sort of be a cog in the wheel. And we've seen some of our earliest team members go on from internship or early employee status to really leading some of the most important functions within the business. We're really looking for people that have that hunger, and how do we raise the bar with each new person we hire?
So you're really on the front lines right now of bringing robotics into an industry that had not really adopted them before. Any thoughts on other industries besides retail where robotics haven't previously played a major role, but you see them playing a major role?
So what's most interesting to me is leveraging, autonomous mobile robotics and things like computer vision in areas that you can highly execute in today. And that might be agriculture and farm fields, that might be commercial cleaning. It's definitely logistics and sort of warehouses. So, those are some of the areas that kind of intrigue me the most.
What's the big picture here for Symbi? Do you see yourself as a robotics company, something else? What will you be known for 5-10 years from now?
We really believe we're kind of building one of the most valuable data sets in physical retail. And, of course, to do that, it really started with leveraging advanced technology like robotics and computer vision. But we really become a data and sort of market insights, sort of company over time. And the way we're seeing that evolve is we've now started to get to greater scale across our various retail partners. Some of the biggest brands in the world are reaching out to us for access to our data, market insight companies like Nielsen and IRI, all the major online grocery players. We have a unique opportunity to help all of these players be more efficient and sort of tighten up the entire value chain. So we see ourselves really, evolving much from a robotics company to a data company.
I see it the same way. So we're all very aligned. Tell us, what kind of adoption has Symbi seen in the market thus far?
Yeah, so today we work with a little more than a dozen, some of the largest retailers out there. Our sweet spot has really been grocery and supermarket stores. We've done work with the likes of Schnucks Markets, which is a $3 billion grocer out of St. Louis, Giant Eagle, a $15 billion grocer out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We've done work on the global stage with Carrefour, who's one of the biggest, folks would argue, sort of top 10, sort of globally throughout the Middle East. We've also done work with Decathlon, the world's largest sporting goods retailer. And one of the things we didn't talk much about in this session today, but Tally not only has capabilities to scan stores using computer vision, but also with RFID. So those retailers that are leveraging RFID for high value items, we're able to take precise store-wide inventory counts. Most recently, we announced a partnership with the largest private grocer in Northern California and Nevada, SafeMart. So super thrilled about that relationship, and we'll have many more to share before the end of the year. So really hope to have the opportunity to bring a Tally to the local stores of all the listeners.
So now we're going to shift to our rapid fire questions. We ask all our podcast guests these, and here they come. What's your favorite fictional robot and why?
Have a number of favorite robots, but as far as the favorite, I would probably say R2-D2. And I think, George Lucas and the team did a really fantastic job in bringing, futuristic technology. And with R2-D2, they created something that was very relatable. I think a lot of interesting thought went into R2-D2, and it's not a big, scary robot. It has a lot of cute and intuitive noises and actions and behaviors, and actually served as a little bit of, sort of design inspiration, for our team as we thought about human robot interaction and in these types of environments.
What was your first job?
My first unofficial job was in my early teen years, building websites, doing basic PC support, and actually helping support my high school's IT network, which I actually caused a lot of anxiety around with the administrators because I found a bunch of vulnerabilities in the IBM AS400 that kept track of everything from student locker combinations to grades to teacher payroll. But outside of some of my early touch points in sort of IT or tech, my first official job working for a company was actually working part-time at Chick-fil-A in a myriad of roles, from, sort of cashiers to sort of a cook. And, it really gave me a deep appreciation for, the customer service side of both the food and broader retail industry.
What was the first concert you attended?
You may laugh at this one, David, given all of your music interest, but I went to a No Doubt and Beck concert. It's my first time in California, early teen years, maybe mid 90s in Anaheim, California at the Pond.
That sounds like a great show. Yeah, that was probably awesome. Okay, what is your favorite interview question when interviewing a job candidate?
One of the aspects I really like to ask about when meeting a candidate, regardless of their role, is I want to understand what they know about our business and how they would position it today. I think it's incredibly important for anyone you hire, of course, to be doing their research as part of the interview process, but be able to properly sort of represent the company, even if they haven't become part of it yet. In addition, I think interviews are sort of a two-way street. I think too often Silicon Valley interviews are sending people to the whiteboard, which I'm not diminishing in any way and is a key part of our strategy. But I also look very deeply at what sort of questions the individual asks us. And I think that's an important indication of both how curious someone is, as well as how they would interact if they get into a situation where they might get blocked or need to escalate.
Well, this has been a great conversation, Brad. Thank you for joining us. It's great to hear the full Symbi story.
David, thank you so much for the opportunity and all your time.
I'm David Packman from Venrock, and today on Running Through Walls, we've been speaking with Brad Bagolia from Symbi Robotics. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for tuning in to Running Through Walls, a Venrock podcast. Special thanks to Willie Wisely, who designed our theme music.